not like an Ohioan at all, and they would keep this formal shine in the design of their clothes and the way they held themselves until she and her father drove them back, and Hallie would sit proudly in the front, feeling at home. "How's your painting?" her father had asked in the car, glancing at Hallie, a look of uncertainty on his face. When she had told him about the oils she'd done last year, he had gazed at the sky for a moment, his hands clutching the wheel, and asked, "Now, do you have people in them, or landscapes, or are you still making them kind of abstract?" Sitting on her mother's bed in the early afternoon light, she thought of those canvases, with penciled arrows and angles, compass points, sketched on top of delicately modeled white and gray, aerial views of a wilderness filled with mountains that, from the air, looked small, barely perceptible. She had begun with earth tones, but gradually she'd turned to white and shades of gray, sometimes a speck of red, so surprising in the expanse that it had the impact of a sudden moment of violence or passion. Each one had "map" in the title, for they were maps, maybe of the heart, more than of any actual place, and of the body, too. She'd been proud of those, and 2 had sold. This spring, though, she'd come to an impasse. She'd attempted to move on to something new, but she hadn't been happy with any of her sketches. She hadn't even felt able to begin stretching a new canvas. She would stare out the window of her studio, studying the gray building opposite and the cars below, the pigeons roosting on lintels and jutting sills, the changing sky. She'd look for any excuse to wrap things up and turn off the light, walking the 5 stories down to the street. "How's Maury?" Her mother's blue eyes looked amused and bitter. "He's fine." "He didn't feel like coming to Ohio?" Her mother emphasized each syllable of Ohio. "He's really busy." Hallie tried to look open, as if her mother's questions were simple. She added, "His firm has a new commission for a big project on Long Island." "Oh." Her mother looked at Hallie as if she might say something about Maury or architects or big projects on Long Island. Hallie stood up and looked out the window. A wheelbarrow, filled with weeds, sat by one of the beds, and a hand rake lay on the walk. "Who's been gardening?" Her mother used to hire a local college student to do the gardening in the spring and fall. In the summer, the garden spilled over its bounds and straggled. Hallie had always been relieved to see a new student each September, kneeling on the stone walkway, pulling out armfuls of weeds, pinching off the heads of marigolds and cutting back the phlox, their leaves whitish from summer blight. Her mother laughed a dry laugh. "Your father's become a gardener, although I doubt that he knows what he's doing." Hallie looked at the flower bed. Someone had planted a cheerful bunch of lavender and white flowers along the border. "It looks like he's doing a good job," she said, and her mother gave a soft snort. As she looked at her father's gardening gloves, abandoned by the side of the pool, Hallie thought about how puzzled and sad Maury had looked this morning at breakfast, sitting at the counter in his old t-shirt and jeans. She missed him now. As soon as she was away from him, she missed him. At home, though, things he did could touch off a fury inside her. She could be having a difficult time with him, arguing about something, and as soon as the phone rang, he'd be genial, laughing and making jokes. Often he'd miss dinner without warning and come home from work around 10 or 11 at night. He had become so busy that they hadn't left the city once this summer. In other summers, on good days, they had sometimes packed up the car to find a beach near a small town. Hallie would sketch or work in her notebook, and Maury would read the paper. Sometimes he would lie on his back with the newspaper over his head like an old man and fall asleep, while Hallie studied the horizon and wondered what it would be like to catch the breezes on a sailboat. Hallie looked at her mother's face on the white pillows. She found herself thinking about Maury, how she'd first loved him because he believed in painting as something important in the world. His father had been a painter, although he had never become well known, and Maury had told her how, growing up, he had watched the way a canvas takes on color and shape. Maury had admired her work, and at first she had wished him to see each new painting from conception on, yet somehow she had begun to keep her new work to herself. She had discovered that the smallest amount of criticism from him, even a pause, could send her into a period of terrible doubt.